can I ask you one question about Cozens?
Yeah.
What is Dylan Cozens? Is he the 31 goal, 68 point guy? Or over these last 2 seasons now, so a season and a half, he has fewer points in this last season and a half than he did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Which one is he?
It's a great question. I think Dylan Cozens is probably would come in right now if you're projecting, say, okay, over the next 5 years of his deal, if he could be a 50 to 55 point player, that's probably who he is, right? Like I kind of cut the difference between the last 2 years because then he averages right around 58. That's high. He's now this year in Buffalo, lots has gone wrong for lots of different guys. And
oh man, what a fence sitting answer though.
No, but that's what I think he is. I think he's a right now. I'd say he's a 55 point player.
So his contract probably makes him slightly overpaid. Not slightly, probably decently overpaid.
A little bit, $1 million. Yeah.
So if that's the case and he's 23, if you're Kevin Adams, do you hang on to him longer and see if he reverts back, or do you move him now while the value is still high before he's found out?
Like, I don't think Buffalo can afford.
Because we're asking the question, there's enough mystery around the league as to, hey, maybe he is the upper tier, upper echelon player that he showed to be at age 21. That's in there somewhere. Can we get it out of him again? Versus if he goes and does this, finishes off this season, and then into next year at the same paces again, the value is going to plummet.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of it, a guy like Cozens, because and this isn't a knock because there's only a handful of, I think, true drivers in the NHL. So he's not a driver. So whichever team takes him, or when you're projecting, you're like, okay, well, who's he going to play with? I think that's a factor that sometimes gets overlooked, right? Guys go to a different situation that's just better for them. It's a better fit. They got a winger or a center iceman that complements their game better. And that helps for certain guys. I don't think there's any question about that. So I got to look up who Dylan Cozens in that who was he playing with mainly that season, when he had his career year, right? And, has that remained the same? Has
Tage Thompson, given the goals that were scored?
Yeah. Well, and Tage Thompson obviously had he had the one unreal year where he scored 47 too, right?
Yeah. I mean, a huge chunk of that had to be playing in his orbit, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I'll look it up right now as we're speaking, but give me your thoughts while I look that up on Brock Nelson. He is, he's been an Islander forever. He's a really consistent player.
Not this year.
Yeah, no, not this year. But who do you think is a fit for Brock Nelson? And which teams do you think are interested?
I think the clear fit is the Minnesota Wild.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, put together the pieces, okay? Warroad, Minnesota native. Bill Guerin, GM of Team USA 4 Nations, picks Brock Nelson having down year. Like, that's not a guy that played his way onto the team. That's a guy that was just on the team. And he picks him for 4 Nations face-off. And you can just see the dots connecting. Minnesota needs a center desperately. Seems like a pretty good fit.
Yeah.
And Bill Guerin and Lou Lamoriello have a history. You can do a deal.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So
I'm not saying that's the only team. Look how thin the center market is.
Oh, yes.
There's a reason why he's number 1 on the board. He's the premier rental center available this year. So you're going to have 5-7 teams that are interested.
So the year that Dylan Cozens had his great year, he played mainly with JJ Peterka and Jack Quinn. He played a total of 63 minutes, 5-on-5 with Tage Thompson. But
so that's like 63 minutes is like 4 to 5 full games worth of even strength.
Yeah, so not much at all, right? When you look at
maybe 6.
Maybe 6. Dylan Cozens, though, that year, He had 39
But
points.
that's the year that Jack Quinn had a great year. Another guy who's been a healthy scratch. Jack Quinn was even younger that year.
Yeah.
And he had what, 30? Did he have 31 or 38 points and 14 goals?
Yeah. Well, the big thing for Dylan Cozens is his 5-on-5 production this year. He's on pace for 34 points, 5-on-5. He had 39 the year he scored 68 points. The difference was his power play points, right? That's when you break
game with Tage Thompson on the unit.
Yeah, when you break down Dylan Cozens that year, like the biggest, it's not his 5-on-5 play that's dropped off, it's his power play production.
Okay, but so Cozens' production as a whole has dropped off. Jack Quinn's as a whole has dropped off. He had 14 goals and 37 points that year. And Peterka's the only one who's held up his end of the bargain. So it makes an even more fascinating question, which is it really these guys or is something else happening around them? How come they can do it 2 years ago and do it together, and now the same group is just 1 year in which everything goes right?
Hey, dude, it's the biggest
It can't
challenge in
be,
the
can
NHL.
it?
Yeah, well, consistency. That's the hardest thing anybody will tell you in the NHL, right? So, and sometimes, Joe, you're a young player, you have a great year, and I don't know if you naturally just think, okay, this is now the bar and this is what I'm going to do, and then the next year it doesn't come as easy, and now you're frustrated, and now the next year it compounds. And I think there's a lot of factors. Like, I think Buffalo came in and they really felt they were going to at least compete for a playoff spot this year, right? Now, whether they make it or not, but at least, you're in the mix and you're right there. And they go over, they start in Europe, they lose 2 straight.
How insanely low is the bar, though? Like, think about this year that we're talking about, the year in which Cozens, Thompson, Quinn, all these guys have great years. They finished 1 point out of the playoffs 2 seasons ago. Last year, the expectation wasn't to compete for a playoff spot. It was to be in a playoff spot. And they finished 10 back, 8 back. They went from 1 point back to 8 points back. Now this year, it might be even worse. Now what?
Well, remember the year, though, that they almost made the playoffs? They were like the 3rd highest scoring team in the league. Like, they had the perfect storm of all these guys having great years. And that's just not, it's like Seattle. Remember when Seattle made the playoffs?
Yeah, I was just going to say, they had the Kraken experience.
Yeah, like everybody produced. Their 4th line had like 40 goals or 50 goals, for God's sakes. They all had, I think, close to 14 goals. It was unreal. And then they got rid of their whole 4th line, funny enough. And then they, all of a sudden they're like, geez, we can't score. So,
you know what's funny? No one's really having that type of year this year. And I think if you were going to say that anyone had it last year, it would be the Canucks. Just about everything that could go right for the Canucks last year did.
Yeah. Yeah, when you have
9-point team.
When you have too many guys, it sounds odd. When you have too many guys have career years, the next year is virtually impossible that you're going to match it. It's too hard. You're always going to have some guys have career years. That's just how it is. And but if you have everybody or the majority of them, then you have a problem.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.